Hey, welcome to Travillian Next. I'm your host, Chief Research Officer for Travillian, Amber Buker, and today we're talking niche banking. Now, a lot of folks will look at a niche market and assume it's just a branding exercise, but the people who build it right don't approach it that way at all. They start with a clean slate. They go deep on the customer with research and user interviews, and they build something that serves the real, unique needs of the population they want to win the right to serve. My guest today, Mary Kate Loftus, has done just that with Impressia, which is designed to serve women-owned businesses. Mary Kate has real credentials as a builder, having spent nearly 20 years at a global bank before leading digital and retail at a large national. Now she's president of Impressia at CNB Bank, based in Clearfield, Pennsylvania. In this episode, Mary Kate got tactical with us. How fast can you actually stand up a de novo division? What products would you never think to build until a customer names it? And what it takes to bring a standalone brand back into the rest of the bank. So let's get started. Hey, Mary Kate, it is so good to have you today. How are you?
I am great, Amber. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. So we're just going to dig right into it. You've said in our prior conversations that the opening insight for Impressia came from watching a surge of female entrepreneurs in markets like Cleveland and Columbus who weren't showing up in the commercial loan book. So I'm curious, how did your team spot that gap, and what convinced you that it was a business opportunity and not just, some customers that you might like to have?
Yes, what a great question. So the original insight came from before I even joined the bank. So what happened is that initially the leadership team started noticing the fact that when you look at the commercial portfolio, the percentage of women weren't as high as the percentage of men, despite the fact that the bank was predominantly led by women. And then also having this macro surge and, women forming businesses, women leading organizations. So what happened it's really started with a question to saying, if we were to serve women better, what is the potential, market opportunity there? And how can we really make a difference to local economies? And that's something that's always been really important to me. When you look at how do you know it really is a viable commercial opportunity, and whether the focus is on women or other specific types of entrepreneurs or other, people in certain communities, when taking a look at how well it resonates right off the bat, right? So the data, we'll talk about that in a moment, but like doing the research to understand what's out there and then being able to see how well real customers, real people say, you're hitting on something for me that's a true need.
It's great that you got to start from kind of a clean whiteboard, if you will, and look at that population from a really specific, dedicated lens. But I know that took a lot of time. I think that it started as just an idea, and then a steering committee, and then it was a standalone division, and now you're in this new phase where you're bringing Impressia back to the rest of the bank. So can you walk folks through, if they're looking at something like this that could be a standalone division, maybe they're not sure what it wants to be when it grows up, what's that process look like when you're starting to look at an idea like this?
Yeah, sure. So I'll tell you a bit about the process that the bank had followed. So as I mentioned, it really started back in 2022-ish, around there, with asking that question of how might we be able to serve women in a better way. At that time, the question, then one person asked another, the head of commercial banking invited in, the head of another division, treasury, and it grew from there. But as they got together, they said, let's take a step back and look at both the quantitative and the qualitative elements here to make a decision on what would make sense. They actually held professionally facilitated focus groups to go deep and listen to women in various cities and at different stages of life. They pulled data and then together married that to say, what might this look like? When thinking about the process, it actually, standing up a de novo division within a bank means you really are looking at everything from the operations, the customer experience, the pricing, the product design, and deciding what meets those clients best. It really takes an all hands on deck approach to be able to do that. But the team did work very quickly to be able to stand up and press.
And that's a really fast process, relatively fast, I think, when you're going that deep on a customer, which is so important. I think, a lot of times when we hear about niche banking, and I experienced this with my startup, which was for Native Americans that are my people, a lot of venture capitalists and folks would just say like, okay, but is it really just digital banking with some marketing slapped on top? And it was like, oh no, we have products that are specifically designed for these folks based on real interviews. To your point, you go deep on the customer, and there are things, if it's a niche worth building for, there are going to be things that are very unique to them, I think.
No, you're totally right. The one of the insights that was uncovered was that often, and it's so interesting because this really applied to all entrepreneurs. So we started off with like women consistently saying this, but found out many entrepreneurs felt the same way. But saying, I don't have enough time to be able to go deep on education for how I be able to make decisions about how to fund my business. If it's a woman in leadership, she'd say, I've been working so hard and I've amassed this amount of money, but I don't yet have that relationship with somebody to really trust them to say, here's how I'm going to be able to build a plan out to get to where I want to be able to be in the future. I think when you think about bespoke products that get developed, we developed Impressia Connect, and there's this amazing woman, Martha Seidenwan, she's down in Cleveland, and she really would do the research, and she would be the face of saying, how do we connect what's out there in the local ecosystem to our customers? So customers only would get direct text messages. There's usually 1 or 2 cents per week with actual links. So like, here's a grant you can apply for, here's an educational opportunity, or here's a networking opportunity. And the more we would do that, we would be able to see through the data what we were offering when people clicked on it, what they liked, what they didn't, and then helped us shape how we evolve that. We also looked at women's wealth and financing from like, and these are things that I think are unique to this target customer, to your point, but like what we would look at is things that would come up is fertility financing and the demand for that. So how does it work if you had a banker who actually had gone through in vitro, and you can say, I don't know how much this is going to cost, and like, what am I getting into, or adoption or other solutions to grow your family? And I think taking a step back to look at those real life solutions that are needed, whether it's lending or, banking or financial planning, how it all comes together to be able to help them grow into a stronger financially person.
And I love that, because looking at the whole person also means that you get a more holistic relationship with your customer, right? So that's fertility financing. Who thinks of that, right? Like, that's not something that you would naturally gravitate towards as a banker if you weren't having those conversations and letting the customer raise that for you.
That's right. That's right. And like we would have, I think, the importance of building an advisory board that brings those insights. So one of the things that I focused a lot on was bringing in advisors, whether it's there's a woman, Ann Ritchie, who's in Cleveland, and she really focuses on investing in scaling businesses, but ones that are from a more diverse founder perspective. The one for fertility financing, Robin Hauser, is a documentary filmmaker, and Robin was doing her film Thaw, and she said, Mary Kate, there's really a lot of like going on with people trying to figure out how to finance this. So I think as banks look outside and look at, kind of get people that are willing to share their stories and say, this is what we're seeing, that would bring that in. And then we could go directly to customers and to people to validate if that really is an opportunity. And if other banks are serving it well, then it might not make sense to pursue that. But I think really looking at like that white space that could be underserved is the best approach.
You have a product mind, and I love that, because that's something that I don't think we see enough in banking. We think of like the commoditized product, but not product from more of a building standpoint, like clean slate, like we've been saying. So I want to learn a little bit more about what you offer. I know you've said that every client has a relationship manager, every customer. There's a lot of networking. There's things like coffee and capital. And of course, you just trained a lot of the bank's staff, the parent institution that Impressia spun out of, to offer some of these services. So can you help us understand like what that stack looks like, what the customer experience looks like, and how what you're doing is more than just a marketing wrapper on ordinary commercial banking?
Yes, and that's a great way to end it when you talk about the marketing wrapper, because I think a lot of people might be naturally, cynical on, is this for real, and is the bank really committed to doing this? What we learned is we started off, as I mentioned, we were listening to customers, and right off the bat, from a relationship perspective, understanding that our clients really want to feel like they have a person. And that was very foundational when we were starting from customer one. So when you're starting at that scale, you are able to say, absolutely, every single person has their go-to resource. But then we said, when recognizing the fact that we were going to grow and scale, right off the bat, we partnered with a company relay to be able to offer text messages to all of our clients. So once the new relationship is established, the customers would get a series of text messages that would begin a true onboarding journey. It would be a welcome message that was from me, but it also said, then here's how you get set up and here's what you want to do. Because many women said, I could start the relationship, but they're busy. And so they can't go through the whole, how do you make this new bank your primary bank? So we wanted to make it easy by saying, here's a reminder. We would do, and then the last thing is the welcome boxes. So we really treated all of our initial clients as founders of the bank because we listened to them. They were helping us determine the path forward as well, and sending welcome boxes that included, books, products from women-owned businesses, handwritten notes, and clients just really, really love that. Now, as we go into the evolution of Impressia Connect, so now Impressia Connect is offered within every bank division that CNB oversees. The part of that experience is to be able to bring the best of that. So really focusing on, we call it learn, connect, and grow. So it's access to the events, the financial literacy, and the really educational relationship management to be able to pursue your financial dreams.
That personal touch is incredible. And shout out to Relay for enabling that. We'll be sure to tag them because you're right. They're right. Like, you start a new relationship with a bank and then you're like, okay, great. It's set up. I'm not going to think about it again. Mm-hmm. And even if there's an approach to onboarding where people are trying to create a relationship, but it's just a phone call that's like, okay, tell me whatever you need. And they're like, okay, but it's more work for me to think about what I need and try to tell it to you than it is worth at some point. So having those nudges and really intentional contact points so that they're not having to work to figure out how to tell you what they want. They're having these natural avenues to express that is really good advice, I think.
Yes. And I think that relationship, I think that was an unexpected, we knew they wanted relationship. Customers said they wanted relationship, but we also expected it much more to be self-serve because people are so busy. And what we found was for areas of focus, such as commercial banking and lending, having that personal relationship truly did not go away. So the more people that are available to help clients, the better.
Well, so you've been in digital leadership at other institutions prior as well. And I know we talked about how relationship banking and digital discipline should really be reinforcing one another. I think a lot of times banks will finally get on board with the digital and then they kind of let the personal experience deteriorate. But you said something that really stuck with me about translating relationship into a good experience. I think a lot of banks underinvest there. So how does that mentality pay off on the balance sheet?
When you think about how you use tools to be able to scale, and often you'll hear so many, I think banks and others say, well, it takes too much time, or the systems weren't designed right, so we don't want to use them. Within CNB, Salesforce is used for relationship management and other use cases as well. But it has to start with that belief of this creates value for the customer and helps us be able to personalize the experience. So when you do everything from like a web to lead form that goes in, and then you make sure there's accountability on that follow-up. And there's all the data around how long did it take to be able to follow up with that client, what was the outcome, what are the offerings that are most likely to be able to really truly help a customer, and then we'll be able to serve them with. So we started with that mindset right from day one, saying we are going to be use every digital capability that the bank had, bringing it to customers right from the beginning. And then it takes that behaviors, belief reinforcement. And I think leading a remote team across multiple states, we would create, you think about like ceremonies where the teams really get into a rhythm. So every Friday, and this has been going on for years, we would get together, jump on the video call, and then depending on, the need might have different agendas for that day, but always incorporating how do we bring in the reporting and the data that we have. And then every month looking at like quarterly business reviews. What are our customers saying? What are we learning? What's our growth, trajectory? And then pulling in, having transparency regarding the performance overall. So that was, kind of the approach we've taken.
Run that by me again. Did I hear you say behaviors, beliefs, reinforcement?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you have to start, it's interesting. Like when you think about behaviors and beliefs, the oftentimes repeated behaviors will then lead to the belief forming. Sometimes it does start with, like, for example, when we stood up the Columbus market, hiring an amazing, established banker, Saber Kershaw. We brought Saber, and she had the belief in what we're doing and how Impressia can help women. She also but then you have to learn the behavior. The more that you do the behavior, the more that reinforcement comes back to create, to be able to validate that belief. But if you always go back to how are we helping people? What did we learn? And were we able to deliver a better experience because we use the tools? If the answer is yes, then it's the right path to continue on. And if not, then it's okay to have a growth mindset and say, we tried something, and that's one of the things I'm really proud about. Just if it didn't work, that is okay. You pivot, you evolve, and you continue to grow.
And you learn from it. And I think that's why failure is not scary. Failure should be rewarding in some sense.
Yes, exactly.
So one of the things that came out of Impressia was that you found that your client base was genuinely different from what the bank served before in a couple of ways that I think a lot of banks are looking for. Your clients are on average a little younger than the rest of the bank, and they're often working with big banks. And I think this is the big one. I think everyone's looking for a younger customer base who, they may be able to win some part of that relationship from a big bank. So what is it about these owners that brought them to you? What is it that they need that others maybe don't?
Yeah, I think that I see it on two ends of the spectrum. I think that the next generation coming up, they really do believe in purpose and money. I think to some extent they see banks as utility, but where they see a value in that, so a value in a relationship or a value in, I don't really need to talk to anyone, but I trust that brand. They're doing something really important that solves a very big problem for me. That loyalty, and that's where you see like the banks that are growing fastest with word of mouth and referrals creates a ton of value. So I think for banks that are thinking about starting a targeted, like niche customer segmented approach, recognizing you may attract who you didn't expect to based on historically your brand would have, in particular from a community bank perspective, and being ready for that because their needs might be different. We also did see though, which was surprising on the other side, it was, and again, looking at a targeted approach toward, supporting women particularly, but not exclusively, being able to see that they had older women really having experiences that gave them a lens that said, I want to help the next generation. And they were also the ones that would come into our office with a check and say, I'm here and I would love to be a client and I want to learn more. I'm going to tell, friends and family about this. So we see it at two ends of the spectrum. And then in the middle, you've got also just people that say, I'm here for the experience. I'm here for the banker. I like the pricing of the products. And that happens in every bank.
And you built the product from the ground up. So they're going to like the pricing because you did the research.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. So you mentioned it, but Impressia does not exclusively serve women. You have plenty of male business owners that work with you and all sorts of folks that have come under your tent. So, but I do want to know, is there something about women entrepreneurs that other bankers should know about things that are unique that you've experienced through this work?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is that women entrepreneurs are really, really busy. Not everybody has families, but many do. And they have many other responsibilities. Often they're the ones that are giving of their time. They're on boards, they're on community foundations, and really, really stretch that. So what that means is that the sales cycle is generally longer. It takes more time to be able to do this. They're more likely to research and really think about the implications of making any financial moves. They move, really with intention, I'll say. So that would be one insight. The other thing I would say too is that when you have to balance that targeted approach to going to market with a closed group of people with bringing others in to be a part of it. So I feel that definitely whenever we've had more people leaning in and feeling part of that growth, part of the ability to support customers, the better off you're able to do versus keeping it really isolated within the bank. Because sometimes, to protect an idea or protect a concept, banks will keep that, that wasn't the case here, but often I know that that's an approach that has worked, but it also comes with its own risk as well.
Okay. All right. So if a bank CEO is listening and they want to build a differentiated growth engine, maybe it's in a segment and it needs to be relationship led, but digitally disciplined. I think we've established that. So other than those things, what should be their first move? And are there any mistakes that you see folks making when they're trying to build a brand?
I think that the first move really would be asking the question and then handing it off to people who are dedicated to be able to go deep into that have the capacity, the bandwidth, and really have the space to be able to focus on it. Another thing would be bringing in the right talent and the right people. So being clear on what are we trying to do specifically, and then matching that to the team that grows around. And when you first get going, it might be that there's a lot of unknowns around how you serve that client, and therefore that path to managing like the P&L line for that individual product or that experience might be different than what you initially thought. So being flexible as you learn more, always listen to the customers, of course. Like that to me is like it, and I know banks really live and breathe by customer feedback, and the best ones are very close to that. But listening to customers is very important. I think in terms of mistakes, again, not running it, like opening others up to be able to come to the table and be part of that development. The more people that feel like they were a part of that, the better off they'll be, because you have more insights and more ownership surrounding that initiative. So I think that's a really important point. And then, being open and having a growth mindset. Like the mistake would be saying, this is the way we've always done it, therefore we'll do it this way. I think that what's happening right now with Impressia Connect is a great example of saying, like, a very bold move in the market, saying we will be really unapologetically focused on this. And then that got market attention, and then it's able to say they're very serious, but then being able to say, okay, based upon what we've learned, we'll continue to grow and now allow more employees to offer it and integrate it within the broader bank. So I think being flexible to how that is done is very important to success.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that about bringing more people around the table, because I've experienced banks that struggle with that. It's always the question of, well, we don't want to distract people. So we'll just keep it with this group of people. But you really don't know what you're missing out on if you don't sort of open the gates a little bit and invite some other folks in.
That's right. And it really creates trust in how it was developed. I think at the end of the day, and it could be, when you're at a bank or even like a fintech, there's people that are more customer facing. There's people that are the product teams, the tech and development teams. And so not making any assumptions about who should be there, because at the end of the day, they all feel that connection to the person that they're serving. So the best employees are the ones that care so much about that. And they're the ones that, even if they're not directionally, you would think that they want to have a seat at the table, they might. So like opening that up, I think, is really important. And then the usual, from a change perspective, communicating really clearly is very important, but then also allowing it to say, well, we're going to be flexible here as we go to market and see what we learn.
Awesome. Well, you definitely have a different mindset than I think folks encounter on the day-to-day banking circuit. I love that you're a product builder and you're clearly very passionate about this. So we are rooting for you, Mary Kate. Tell folks where they can find you if some of your fellow executives want to chat about this.
Yeah, sure. So personally, I'm on LinkedIn, but anyone that wants to learn more about Impressia Connect, it's impressiaconnect.com. And there's an amazing team of leaders who are, I think, building some really cool things here. So I'm very excited to see how Impressia continues to grow and evolve.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Mary Kate.
Thank you, Amber. I appreciate it.